Well, welcome everybody this to PACE NSC weekend here in beautiful Rosemont, Illinois. My name is Sadie Britton, and I am a PACE member, former officer from 2022 to 2024, and an alum of the Quiz Bowl team at the College of William and Mary. And I am very pleased to welcome you to the 2026 David Riley Topics in Quiz Bowl Conference. So, this is an annual Quiz Bowl conference primarily held to support the efforts of coaches nationwide in developing and promoting high school quality quiz bowl. High quality, excuse me, high school quiz bowl. The conference consists of a panel discussion on topics of interest to the quiz bowl community. This is anything ranging from team and circuit development, conduct and interactions between community members, scaling up from high school to college, and making your home in Quiz Bowl. Now, the Riley Conference is named in honor of David Riley. He was the former Quiz Bowl coach at Loyola Academy in Wilmette, Illinois. He was a tournament host, chair of the Illinois High School Scholastic Bowl Coaches Association, question writer, and a PACE member. David Riley unfortunately passed away in 2015 at the age of 59, but his enthusiasm for Quiz Bowl has had a deep and lasting impact on this game in Illinois and across the country, and we're honored to have the Riley Conference named after him. So, a little bit of what the next couple of hours are going to look like here in the Rosemont Ballroom at the Hyatt Regency O'Hare. I am joined by a wonderful panel of 7 players, coaches, and community members, and we are going to focus our discussion today on circuit building and development. So I am going to ask all of our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will dive right in.
Hi, my name is Colin McNamara. I'm the founder of Idaho Quiz and Academic Teams, and I work in Quiz Bowl at all sorts of levels in the Northwest, from high school to college to even intra-regional development. So.
My name is Mark Taylor. I'm the current coach at Walter Payton College Prep High School in Chicago. I am also a steering committee member on for the Illinois High School Scholastic Bowl Coaches Association.
Hi, I'm Connolly Nugent. I'm a recently graduated senior from Walter Payton College Prep High School. I played Scholastic Bowl all 4 years there and led the team for my last 2.
Hi, I'm Andrew Gao. I'm a junior, and I am one of the club captains of Belmont Quiz Bowl. I started playing in 6th grade, and since then I've played a lot of tournaments, I've ran a lot of tournaments, and I've also worked on sets.
My name is Larry McGillicuddy. I've been the coach at Innovation Academy since the school opened in 2021, and I'm also on the board for the Georgia Academic Team Association.
My name's Greg Bossick. I run 5 leagues in the state of Ohio, as well as numerous Saturday invitational events and the NAQT Ohio State Championships.
Hi, my name is Ben Dillon. I'm the coach at St. Joseph High School in South Bend, Indiana. Fun fact about me, I was Pete Buttigieg's high school Quiz Bowl coach.
Well, we are very glad to have this fantastic panel with us for this discussion. So, the first thing that I noticed when I asked who was going to be on the panel when I was first invited to moderate was the great geographic diversity that we have represented on this panel. Everything from the Midwest to the Northeast, New England, with Andrew being in Massachusetts, to, and I hope I don't put you on the spot, Colin, but the Pacific Northwest and kind of that Mountain West area. I would be curious to hear, and Colin, if you would like to answer first, great. If not, anybody else, please feel free to jump in. But thinking about developing teams and circuits in areas where you may not necessarily think of Quiz Bowl as an activity that may attract a lot of interest, resources, just not something that people really know about or think of. And what does that process look like in putting the work into building a circuit there?
I mean, that's something I've always struggled with, just because one of the issues we have in the Northwest is just the circuit is so sparsely populated. So it's really hard to build a circuit at all, except in the larger cities like Boise or Seattle, just because there aren't teams, there aren't places to host tournaments. Schools have to drive long distances, and it's so that is something I have struggled to do. I mean, I have managed to get some schools in Boise to to form teams and to have a circuit there. UW has done the same thing in Seattle, just a couple tournaments. We've tried we do a lot more online just because that works a lot better for the sparse population and the long distances between schools. But it is really hard, especially for me, because I'm not in the public schools, so it's hard. I don't really have the connections that some other people might have to like other coaches or other schools or other teachers. So that is something I've really struggled with, and it's not something I have done very well with. So I don't know if something.
When you're talking about the way that you are running a lot of online tournaments in that area, as we all know from the years of the pandemic when the vast majority of Quiz Bowl was, of course, happening online, there are great benefits to the accessibility of online Quiz Bowl, but also have those drawbacks for sure in kind of making a unified circuit. A little earlier before we got started, I was talking a little bit with Greg about just what the Ohio circuit looks like, and you were making some comments about the very many small schools that would be considered by most Quiz Bowl organizational definitions as small schools. I'd love to hear your thoughts on developing kind of a circuit out of those small schools in those areas of Ohio.
Yeah, the average school in Ohio, in terms of grades 10 through 12 enrollment, would fit ANQT's definition of small, 500 or fewer for public schools. For me, as I mentioned, I run 5 leagues, and for me, leagues have been a very important step in expanding the circuit and building connection. I understand that some in the community don't like leagues because they're more considered a sports thing, and you can use leagues that already exist as a jumping off point, but there's nothing that says you can't build a league with just 9 schools who are close to each other, or 8 or 10 or whatever the number is that you can get interest from. I started a league this year, the Hancock, Hardin, Logan League, which was 9 teams, 3 from each county, Hancock, Hardin, and Logan. And it was a very successful year. We had some schools that had lots of Quiz Bowl experience and others that had barely any of the quality that we want to see perpetuate throughout the circuit. It is difficult to reach out and try and get involvement from schools that haven't participated in the circuit before, but I've found that once you get them through the door, if you can get them to buy in just for one tournament, even if it's an after-school 6-round event, somebody on that team is going to get bit by the bug, and all it takes is one, and then they've got it. And then they're going to want to come back for more of it, especially if the tournament's short. If you leave them wanting more, they'll ask for more.
If you leave them wanting more, they'll ask for more. I like the way you said that. Does anybody have any thoughts related to that? I'd be particularly interested in hearing from our 2 students as well, what that sort of, the way that Greg was talking about trying to get those schools who maybe have not done Pyramidal Quiz Bowl in the style that we do here at PACE or NAQT or any of those other kind of organizations that are considered high quality, quote unquote, Quiz Bowl, and maybe have competed in other formats that don't quite map onto this. So either Connolly or Andrew, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who wants to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think the New England circuit is quite different in that a lot of the schools are pretty big and there are a lot of academic competitions going on. One thing in Massachusetts is we have a show called High School Quiz Show, which is one of the better run, like local TV quiz shows. And I think one way of getting those schools to go into Pyramidal Quiz Bowl is just actively seeking out their coaches, whoever runs their quiz show team, and just including a little blurb about how Quiz Bowl and Quiz Show are different and how they're welcome to come to a Quiz Bowl tournament and participate and try it out. So we've had a lot of success getting quiz show teams to show up to our tournaments in the past, and I think this is something that can happen basically anywhere there's a quiz show.
Yeah, I think Payton, especially coming into such a well-developed Illinois circuit, the issue wasn't, where are we going to play Quiz Bowl or where are we going to find these well-run tournaments, but can we get people on this team to bring to these well-run tournaments? And when I entered my freshman year, the team had been around for about 2 years. It had been started over Zoom by kids who were then juniors. So when I kind of stepped in and started recruiting, a big issue was trying to find kids who were interested. How do you recruit for a team that was once just a group of friends? How do you make sure you can cover every category? Payton is smaller than some other Chicago public schools. We're not the smallest, but our class size is a little smaller. So it was recruitment was definitely our biggest issue, not so much finding tournaments.
I see.
And when it comes to a location like Chicago Public Schools, especially if you're looking now we're looking at kind of like the opposite of what Colin was talking about with like the sparsely populated rural regions. Now, if we're thinking about like an urban public school district, one thing that I found is that there are just a lot of barriers in that sort of environment. And when you look around, really just across the country, a lot of those urban areas, a lot of people just ask, like, why does that urban area not play Quiz Bowl? And in my experience, I've run into some various challenges. One is that if you look at like teacher contracts, like anywhere else in Illinois where the activity is pretty well established, they get some kind of a stipend for coaching the activity. That we don't have that in our teacher contract. And so it can be really, really hard to even just convince a teacher to say, hey, you want to give up your Saturdays or even your after schools, even your evenings, and take this group of kids to a Quiz Bowl tournament, and you're not going to get paid anything for it. Do you want to go to 20 Saturdays throughout the year and not really get paid anything?
You got to be doing it for the love of the game.
And in my case, I was willing to kind of bite that bullet for the love of the game, as you say. But at some other schools, they are just like, no. Just general funding is also a challenge. I mean, running a Quiz Bowl tournament, paying the moderators, buying the questions, that costs money. If you've got like budget challenges, that makes things tough. And then I think we also just kind of have the challenge when I'm thinking about like looking out at other schools in Chicago public schools, we also run into this issue where partly there's a lot of schools where they just don't even know that this activity exists for some reason. But then even if there might be like one or two kids, even at a school that has over 4,000 students that I was trying to work with this past year, there was a school that managed to get about 5 or 6 kids, and they were doing some practices, but they even just had troubles with getting that group of kids to commit to going to something together on a Saturday. So I think it's almost kind of like some opposite challenges to like the sparsely populated regions, but here it's more looking at like money issues and can you convince people to buy into things and just go for it even though the money side isn't going to favor them at all.
Right. And how is this experience that you've had these past few years, kind of getting the Walter Payton team up and running, how has that been informing your work with the steering committee and the Illinois Quiz Bowl Coaches Association?
Yeah. Honestly, when I'm working with the steering committee, honestly, I'm kind of disconnecting myself from what I do with my team.
I see. Okay.
I do at least like keep my local area in mind. I do kind of like keep at least in the back of my head ideas like, well, if we're thinking about this idea, like would that like provide any benefit to schools out here if they wanted to do it? Would that be a detriment? It honestly hasn't really led to any big influence on directly on that work.
I see. Okay. So you've been oh, I'm so sorry, Ben. Did you want to add?
Go ahead.
Okay. we'll come back to whatever you wanted to say as soon as absolutely. So what you're describing with with kind of being a new team entering the circuit that's already very kind of well set up and well known and well respected. Illinois has a long legacy of doing well, especially the last few years in the national tournaments. Larry, I'd like to ask you a little bit about because Innovation Academy, obviously there is a great circuit in and around the Atlanta metro area down in Georgia, but with Innovation Academy being a brand new school that just opened up within the last 5 years, like kind of building that team from scratch in a brand new school environment. What does that look like for you and for your colleagues that work with you on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say like, so we're a public, STEM school. It's pure lottery, but it still attracts kids that are like high achieving kids. So that made it a little easier because the type of kids that go to Innovation Academy are kids that probably would, love doing something like that, love doing something like quiz bowl. So I had a lot of kids that were interested, and we're in North Fulton, so finances usually aren't a problem. Usually we're able to get parents to pay for flights, and we host 2 tournaments and raise a lot of money that way to help for some of that. But the biggest problem I've had is we have so many people, and just to piggyback on what Mark was saying, like the biggest issue for getting new teams or even growing a bigger team is where getting someone who wants to be a coach or an assistant coach. I have not been able to find anyone the whole time I've been able to do that as assistant coach. Innovation Academy, we're known in the Georgia circuit for bringing 4 or 5 teams to every tournament, and we have a large team because there's so much interest, and that does make it a little bit hard, sometimes for me to manage, a lot of what's going on with the team, and that's kind of one of the barriers I think for getting someone to set up and start a new program, and so it's been difficult. It takes a lot of time, but it's the having kids that are interested in it, it makes it a lot easier. And so I think one of the things building, at least on the high school circuit, is like building up a middle school circuit. Obviously, definitely does that, and that's what we've seen in Georgia. The middle school circuit in Georgia is really really strong with Riverwatch, River Trail, and a lot of other teams that have just fed in a lot of really players, and they'll get they'll find somebody, they'll pester teachers until So when you have that kind of thing, so it's just getting people in the school that want to do it, getting a coach, and getting players that are interested in it is really important.
Could I jump in? And could I also just give a general shout out to parents who are awesome and support teams?
Absolutely.
Our team, as I also learned my first year at Payton, which was the second year that the team was competing, at least in our urban district, we also have just tons of logistical challenges. Like if I want to go on a field trip and if I want to submit the paperwork for it, they say, you need 2 chaperones. Can't just be you taking the kids. No, you need a second person, and that person needs to be registered with our district. And for us, that second person, or maybe the 3rd, 4th, 5th, as it's now kind of gotten to be, those have always been the parents of the kids on the team for us. My first year, it was honestly really, really hard. There were tournaments where we were just scraping by to find one parent who would do it. We had tournaments where that parent's kid would get sick the night before with like a 103 fever and not be able to go, and that parent would still come chaperone so that the team could participate.
That's incredible.
But what was really, really awesome was that by around the end of that school year, there was a couple of more parents who decided, hey, like I'm gonna come watch, because this is what my child is doing. I want to see what this is all about. Like they're talking about how they enjoy this, and well, the second year we had moms of 3 out of our 4 A-team people just coming to every single thing that we went to. When we went to nationals out in Ruston, all 3 of those parents. They've been able to help with fundraising efforts because we don't have any sort of budget explicitly from our school to run the team. They help with either just donating to the team or just doing fundraising efforts themselves. When we've there's another team here at CPS, Northside College Prep. They were in their first year or so, they were just trying to find a staff member who would be the coach, and it just didn't work out. And what ended up happening there was that the top player's mom wound up being getting onboarded as the coach for them. And so I think one big takeaway from this really is, like, if you're trying to build up a team and if you're thinking like we need support, like we need helpers, just encouraging the parents to like come and just come to a tournament for a day. Make them aware, like, hey, this isn't going to be like Little League baseball. Like, sit in the back, be respectful. I mean, our game is fun. It's fun to play, but it's also fun to watch. And the experience that I've had is that parents love watching it. And when they see how much fun it is, like, they'll want to come back. They'll want to help support it.
Yeah, and I think another place where we've gotten very lucky with parents is one of the most difficult logistical issues from a student's perspective is transportation. As we are one of the few Chicago public schools that participates, and most of the students in our school are transit riders. They take the bus to school, they take the train to school. Not many of them are drivers. Among the drivers, less have cars. And Chicago Public Schools has very strict transportation rules regarding how you can get to and from locations, and we also don't have access to a team bus. So, transportation logistics to and from a suburban tournament that may be an hour away, or even some of the state tournaments where we need to leave the day before and you are only allowed to ride in two people's cars because those are the only ones that we are able to have permission slips for. Transportation logistics as a student have been some of the more difficult ones. It's gotten easier over the years as the team has grown larger. It's much easier to find a ride when there's 8 people or when there's 16 people going to the tournament as compared to 8 or even 4. But when I was first a freshman, getting to places like Homewood Flossmoor, a suburb where there's no public transit to, or Barrington, or some of our state tournaments was very difficult. So parents stepping up to help with transportation was really important to the team.
Yeah, and that's something that in Georgia, like, well, we have a pretty vibrant Metro Atlanta, but we have an interesting mix of the Metro Atlanta and the rural schools. So we have a lot of tournaments, but a lot of them are in, near Athens, which is like a couple hours away. Like, we have tournaments of Commerce, we have tournaments in Covington. These are like hour and a half, and that's probably more than half of the tournaments are like that kind of trip. So, yeah, we usually we don't do a team bus, but we have parents and carpool situations and a whole network of people that help get that done. But that definitely is a challenge. Is how do you get tournaments at? And part of the problem is, like, a lot of the schools in Atlanta or places that would be closer, it's harder to get the logistics for those schools to host a tournament. The rural schools have space, and it's sometimes a little bit easier for them to host a tournament. So that's why it works that way.
Right.
I was going to speak to and then the students can weigh in on this. It is monumentally more difficult to navigate high school these days, given the pressures that are coming at you you have to be in 20 zillion activities in order to appeal to a university. And so Quiz Bowl is in competition with all of those activities. So at our school, like, I will start the year with a whole mess of kids, and then sooner or later mock trial will take one of them or two of them, and then the musical will take a few of them, and it is difficult to persuade kids that in order for us to be good at Quiz Bowl, yeah, you're going to have to do a fair amount of work, of studying. But we want to balance that with this activity is really fun to do. And maybe the transportation thing sometimes is not as fun. I speak as a person who managed to, on the way to Purdue, hit a patch of ice and we flopped the van on its side. So now we're down to one van. So
Was
was
everybody
more difficult
okay?
to get here. Thankfully, everybody was okay. Yes.
Okay, I'm glad
So,
to hear that. Yes, and I've been curious to hear from you, Ben, specifically, given how long you've been doing this and how you've kind of seen the circuit in Indiana, which is not. And you please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But another place that has a strong circuit. You absolutely have some wonderful teams that come out of Indiana, St. Joseph, Park Tudor. But how you've kind of seen that circuit evolve over your lengthy time as a coach.
well, I started as a player in '86, went to Purdue, and then came back to my alma mater to teach. Um, at the time, effectively, there were 3 leagues in the entire state. One of them was the Northwest Chicagoland type league. One was in South Bend, and then the biggest league was in Indianapolis. And we didn't even know that each of the other leagues existed at the time. And then a fellow from the Indianapolis League, the organizer of that, figured this out and said, we're starting a state championship. And so suddenly the ball started rolling, but for a good 10 plus years, I would say, it really was nothing more than those 3. Like at one point, there was a Culver Academies started a team when Phil Blessman from Minnesota moved there, and he started doing tournaments. I thought this pyramidal quiz bowl thing was, out to lunch because I was used to short toss-ups from chip bowl. And it was like, yeah, well, this is not going to go anywhere. This is not any fun. And through hosting those tournaments, he started to turn on a few more teams. They tried to join our league. They were willing to travel, 45 minutes to go to the matches. And then the next year they were like, hey, we're willing to host. And the rest of the teams in the league were like, absolutely not. So I talked to him and said, you can start a league in your own area. And he was willing to do that, and suddenly there was like a 4th and then maybe a 5th league and so forth. Things still didn't do very much until probably about 8 years ago or so, or if you prefer 6 or 7 years ago. The Indiana Association of School Principals contacted us. Specifically, they talked to me and they were like, how can we make Quiz Bowl grow in Indiana? It was like, you guys have the outreach to all the schools that we've never been able to touch, especially like the southern part of the state. No one was playing Quiz Bowl south of Indianapolis at all. That's half the state.
Wow.
And they took over the state championship, and they had that necessary outreach, and now the number of schools playing Quiz Bowl has, I think, almost tripled. And Park Tudor is not a team that existed really before 8 years ago. And one of the things that supercharged them was a middle school in the area, Sycamore Middle School, decided they had parent support. They decided they were going to form a team, and they started coming to high school tournaments. And if you're running a tournament, you should be open to having a middle school play up. And they had one particular player who, as soon as I knew which high school he was going to, I was like, well, they're probably winning state for 3 out of the next 4 years or so forth. But yeah, you can get good at this game from nowhere, and both Walter Payton and Innovation Academy can attest to that. Like St. Joe's program has existed since '86, and we've sort of always been around, but you can work your way up very, very fast if you've got the right people, if you can approach the right people to be coaches who can make it a fun activity for students while getting them to try to actually get good at it. If you have that kind of support from a teacher, you have that kind of support from parents, and you can get students to somehow figure out a way to prioritize this in their lives.
Yeah.
Greg, you've been nodding very vigorously as you've been listening to Ben talk. Do you have any thoughts you want to add there?
Like I said before, if you get him in the door, get him to play a couple of games. I'm going to shout out one school in particular from very rural northwest Ohio, Putnam County. not related to the spelling bee. Pandora Gilboa didn't play a game in the format when they came to their first tournament that I ran 2.5-ish years ago. And they had a good experience at that first tournament. They played Northmont, who are here this weekend. Northmont at the time was reigning state champion. Lost badly. But one thing I've always said is all good teams are born of a butt kicking. They took that butt kicking and they decided to get better. And like you said, Ben, you can get real good real quick. And they've had a combination of a willing coach, willing parents, willing students, and they've finished, they went from that first tournament to state, won the very small school classification, went to SSNCT, finished top 4 in VSS, and have been there each of the last 2 years. And, they're number 2 in all small schools, and they made top 10 throughout the state of Ohio at the last state championship. For me, going out and finding those types of schools in those programs is what keeps me going in this activity. I went to a small school. My graduating class was 63. I started coaching in a small school. They were smaller than mine. And, when I took over the Mahoning League in the Youngstown area, we switched to ANQT in 2007. I believe we were the first league in Ohio to switch to toss a bonus quiz bowl. 3 years later, South Range came here, and when SSNCT didn't exist yet, but the small school title was a subset played for at HSNCT. They went as far as they could in the regular playoffs, parachuted into the small school bracket, and then beat Russell in the final to win it. That validated a lot of what I was doing in Youngstown and gave me a platform to expand that around the state. Ohio is very patchwork, much like Indiana is. There's no one dominant format. Even in the days when former Cooper winner Sue Carosa was in charge of the Ohio Academic Competition, which is not Pyramidal Quiz Bowl, if you crossed a county line, the name of the game changed. In Ashtabula County in the far northeast, in Mercer County in the far west central, they called it Scholastic Bowl. I don't know if they had someone from Illinois who was the first to bring the game to them, but if you were in the Cleveland area, because the Cleveland TV show was a form of its academic, it was called Academic Challenge. If you were in the Columbus area, it was In the Know. If you were in the Dayton area, it was High Q. It was just based on whatever TV show existed. Unfortunately, as the TV shows have fallen off, some of the circuits have fallen off with them. Suburban Columbus is woefully underrepresented because the TV show died right around the same time as the pandemic, and a lot of those teams went away.
That's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about some teams are born with the butt kicking. I think when you're starting a team, the best thing so when I started Innovation Academy, it was kind of an interesting time because it was the year right after the pandemic, and so you had teams in Georgia that had been around for a while, but some had kind of fallen off. So I started this program brand new. A lot of middle schoolers who didn't really have a normal middle school experience. And then at my school we have they say we have this club time in the middle of the day. They had all these different things and they didn't want to do practice and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, we'll meet in the middle of the day and we'll do what we can with that, but let's go to a tournament. We went to a tournament and then, we did pretty good, but still they were like, oh yeah, we need to spend more time. So to me, the thing is, if you're starting a program, get those kids to a tournament as soon as you can. Don't wait. I know some teams are like, oh, we're not ready yet. We're gonna wait 3, 4, 5. But no, I think that's a bad idea. I think get them into a tournament as soon as possible. When they see how other people are buzzing right away, they're like, how do I do that? And then they're gonna want to study. They're gonna learn how to do better. They're gonna practice more, and then they'll want to play more, and then they'll want to do more tournaments. So I think that's a really good thing. Just get them to play. That's the fun part. Play. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Larry and Ben make really good points about middle school quiz bowl. I started in 6th grade, and so I really got to see the importance of middle school quiz bowl. I think there's just so many benefits. For example, it's a lot easier to get middle schoolers to join quiz bowl, I think, just because going back to what Ben says, in high school there's this sort of notion that you have to do so many different activities. Then you have quiz bowl competing with all of these different academic activities. Whereas in middle school, I feel like it's a lot easier to just pick a thing and just not have to worry about all of that. It might also be easier to find a faculty advisor because I know for Belmont, our middle school club is run through the parent-teacher organization, and so people who register have to pay, but that means that the teacher advisor gets paid, which is good. And about what Ben was saying about like allowing middle school teams to play up at high school tournaments, I think that's so crucially important, just to let middle school teams, play more tournaments. And the thing is, as a middle school team, you could go into a high school tournament with zero expectations. I could speak from experience. I played a lot of high school tournaments when I was in middle school, and I'm very grateful to have had that opportunity. And so for a middle school team, you could just go in with no expectations, right? So you really aren't expecting to beat high schoolers, but when you do, it feels great. And so I think it's a really great way to, develop a feeder program, and that will support your high school program later.
Kind of on that note, one other thing that I found is that on the subject of like just getting the kids to the tournaments, doing that, especially like for your freshman recruits, your sophomore recruits, but like especially those new freshmen, getting them to a tournament, like if you have to, whatever it takes to get that B team in, that C team in, that is so important. My first year when I was coaching, we had this group of the kids who were basically the ones who established the team. They founded the team. It was this friend group. They were eager to go to tournaments, and we were going to get that A team to the tournaments, and that wasn't a huge issue. Funding was really, really hard to get to take like a B team or anything like that to anything more. But we had a few of these freshman recruits, a couple of whom now are on our B team here this weekend, and at least at the practices, like they were interested in it. Like it was really clear. Like, okay, if I can get these folks to some tournaments, like that's what needs to happen. And there was actually one tournament in December of that year, which was hosted by David Reinstein, and the entry fee was like $120. That money wasn't in our account. We didn't really even have that money at that point. And I don't think that this is something that anyone should necessarily expect to do. But what I found myself doing was saying, you know what? I'm just going to throw $120 at the team. I want to get these freshmen there. I want to get them playing. I know they'll get hooked. But what I really, really need is for the freshmen to be the ones getting hooked. It's great if these juniors and seniors are getting to play everything, but if they're the only ones getting to go, that's not going to give you any long-term survival of this team. It's great that they are so enthusiastic about helping to recruit these freshmen and get them excited. But if you want this team to survive more than 3-4 years, if you want this team to keep going, you need to take those freshman recruits. You need to get them just as into it, just as excited about it, just as committed to it. So when they are becoming the juniors and the seniors, when they're becoming the older kids, they're going to have equal or greater passion to get the next generation going. And that's the cycle that you really have to make sure is able to happen. And whatever it does take, if you are able to get that B or C team and get those freshmen hooked, regardless of your A team, that does so much.
That's kind of the beauty of Quiz Bowl is the way it works is like if you're playing a sport or some other, competitive activity, like if you're the, freshman or you're the third or fourth quarterback or third or fourth running back, like you ride the bench and you don't get to participate, right? Quiz Bowl, we have the opportunity. Like you're the fourth best history player. Well, we have a D team. You get to play, you get to play all these matches, rebracket, play, get a lot of experience. So you get to hop right in and do this activity right away instead of just sitting around watching everyone else do it.
Yeah, I think outreaching to freshmen is really important, and my perspective has kind of changed on this as I've, moved up through high school. As a junior, some members of our team, really want to focus on our older members, our existing members, but I think it's really important to focus on freshmen as well, because one thing I've noticed is that it's really hard to get people into Quiz Bowl in the middle of the year, because when you walk into a room and you see everyone else who knows what's going on, knows the rules, they're getting good buzzes, it feels, I imagine it feels kind of hard. There's like barriers to entry here. So I think it's really important to reach out to freshmen, get them started early. And one thing Belmont Quiz Bowl has done in the past few years is we've done a first tournament free policy, where if this is literally your first Quiz Bowl tournament, we cover the cost. And we have gotten a lot of freshmen who probably wouldn't have attended tournaments to attend tournaments through this.
Yeah, I think that's something that Payton Quiz Bowl has really expanded in the last couple of years. We started doing a freshman preschool year like boot camp almost. We get them into Payton, which one thing about Payton is we're selective enrollment. Most kids coming to Payton will not commit to the school until late March. We don't know they're coming to school. We don't really get a list until April or May before they come into school. So really getting them as a freshman is kind of difficult, but we do a week-long camp. We learn the rules. We also promise them 3 chances for tournaments. We say we will take you to novice, we will take you to kickoff, and then we will take you to either the Rhinestein tournament hosted in December or the Loyola Ultima tournament hosted in January, which has made a lot of the kids really interested because right off the bat we can say we can promise you 3 tournaments. We also say we can promise you close to 10 if you're willing to follow our very successful 3-step plan. This is the boot camp where we also introduce them to QB Reader. That has gone extremely well. Kids like video games. QB Reader is just a Scholastic Bowl video game. And it's gotten to the point where we now have more issues with kids playing QB Reader in class when they're not supposed to than kids not actually doing any work for Scholastic Bowl. And it's even gotten to the point where we've had to be a little bit more selective about how many kids we take to tournaments. Our budget is bigger, but our team has also increased by about 20 people, most of whom are underclassmen. So having to say we can't take 5 teams to a tournament where we have 5 teams worth of people interested because we just don't have the funds means we have to be a little bit more deliberate about, okay, maybe we take 6 teams to a kickoff tournament, which in Illinois is a little bit cheaper. We can afford a 6th team and no one has to sub, even if we play one of the teams a little bit short. But we'll end up taking less kids to a later tournament that will cost a significantly higher amount of money. But freshman recruitment has gone very well for our team.
Right. Greg, you've been looking like you wanted to say something for a little bit.
Piggybacking off of multiple points, one of the things that I emphasize in the leagues that I've set up is that we have a JV competition. It's just another avenue for players to get in. And I don't restrict roster sizes in league. I've had schools enter 30 kids, just a varsity and a JV team, because you never know who you're going to have week to week. Some kids come in and out. Some kids have other commitments. Band, especially in the fall, is a big one. And it's just another opportunity to get people behind the buzzer, even if it's for a game or 2. As a league organizer, could I save money by just running varsity only and not having to pay the per team fee for every school to enter a B team? Yes. But what does that do to help? Not much. You have to, as an administrator speaking with that hat on, you have to create those opportunities for people to play. And if it's middle schoolers playing up, if I've got a lot of schools that are K-12 schools, so they can draw from those younger grades and get them up into a JV match when there's no established middle school team. Unfortunately, in Ohio, the middle school circuit is not as well established as it could be. But if they have the opportunity to jump up and play on a JV team, they're more willing to take that step on a Wednesday than committing to a full Saturday, in my experience.
I actually wanted to. So you mentioned this is the second time I think you mentioned midweek, short like after school teams. And do you find that's easier to get students to participate in that than a weekend tournament, like a Saturday tournament?
As introduction to the activity, absolutely.
I mean, does anybody else do like midweek tournaments? Or,
like
just from the other
Well, our leagues are always on Wednesdays. I've wondered, and I would ask you guys this question too. I had one coach tell me that they thought having one match every week was detrimental to Quiz Bowl growing compared to having Saturday tournaments for two reasons. On a Saturday tournament, students will be able to play multiple games. So if they only play one game during the week and they never score during the game, they get discouraged from week to week. But if they play an entire Saturday, they're going to score at some point, and that's, nothing succeeds like success type thing. So I'm sort of wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I tailor my competitions to what the coaches want. When I took over the Toledo League, they were adamant on one game, not every week, like every other week, because they wanted that time off. I've got them to relent a bit on needing a week off between every game, but they're still on one game a week, except at the end. We have 4 divisions of 7, north, south, east, west. We bring the champions of each division, seconds of each division, etc., and they play 3 games on the final day. My Mahoning League has always been, even before we switched to the toss-up bonus, 2 games every Wednesday. When we switched to NQT, I said, we're playing the full packet. We're paying for it, so why not play it? So we give them 48 questions, or almost, 2.5 regular games on a Wednesday. But, the coaches are the ones paying the entry fee. So if they push back and tell me, we would rather do 20-20 instead of 24-24, okay, I'll listen. But, the 2 biggest things in my experience that I found are why leagues have had the success they've had. One is the comparison to the non-pyramidal format is individual recognition. I can give all league, first team, second team, third team, honorable mention. I can set, top 4, next 4, next 4. I can clearly communicate that to the coaches, and the players know that those
And have
awards
stats to back you up rather than just being subjective about who's the person on the team who's answering.
Exactly. I've stolen ideas from sports. My day job is with the Ohio High School Athletic Association, but as my family, who are in the audience, will tell you, I'll watch anything. I'll watch anything sports related. One thing that we've done in our leagues is we've recognized centurions. Anyone who scores 100 points in the game, took that from cricket. We give them an award at the end of the season if they score 100 points in a game. They love that.
Right.
But yeah, individual recognition, and then the thing that their athletic peers don't usually get the opportunity to do is compete for a national title on their field of play. No polls, although polls exist in this activity. You get to play for a title. The athletic peers may not get to do that, but our folks, our activity, whether it's here, Atlanta, elsewhere, they can play for one.
And the second reason I was given by coaches for tournaments over leagues was they thought that it sapped the energy of the coaches to have to play and, arrange for matches one every week and so forth, whereas, a one-off Saturday and you get to play 10 matches was better for them.
John, I did sign up for an online tournament just for novice kids, and it was like a once a week thing, and that was one of the most stressful things I did as a coach because it wasn't set like a Wednesday, so maybe that's the solution. But it was like you had to schedule a time with the other team, and then I'm getting 4 kids to try to find out when they're available and all of that, and that was super stressful. Rather than saying, hey, this tournament's on Saturday, be there, unless you have a very good reason. You're going to be at that tournament, and you'll be there all day. That's a lot easier to me than scheduling it from week to week. But I think the thing is, different circuits have different needs and preferences. So what works in one place might not necessarily be what needs to happen everywhere. But that's been my experience.
So in Illinois, or at least in Chicagoland, conference leagues are pretty common. In our conference, we actually play our conference league just as 2 Saturdays. We might do like 10 games one Saturday, 9 games the next Saturday, and that's it. But in the suburbs, for the most part, they are like after school 1 game, and that's it, and like over like 8 or so weeks. When I grew up and when I was playing in high school out in the far west suburbs of Chicago, that's kind of how our league operated too. And back then, the IHSA format was 30 toss-ups, 30 bonuses. I won't even go into how the bonuses worked back then. Games took forever, so you only played one. I do want to agree to the point of those just doing those after-school leagues being potentially detrimental. Like if it potentially, at least to like the development of the teams. What I remember from seeing my team that I played on way back in about 15 to 20 years ago, and also just seeing some of the suburban, not all, some of the suburban leagues in Chicagoland. When a lot of those teams that do their conference leagues after school, you don't really see them at anything else. You don't see them at any of the Saturday tournaments. And then when the IHSA state tournament happens, you don't really see any of them winning a regional. One of them did win a regional this year. They're a really quite good team from Downers Grove. They gave us a good challenge at our sectional. But the other thing that I remember seeing was that those team organizations also tended to be definitely on the smaller side in terms of the number of students. I think even if you do have like the varsity and the JV, if that's the only thing that your team is doing, well, at least in those leagues, that means 10 kids getting to play at a time. That means if you think you want to have 20 kids, well, you're gonna have to be subbing. You're gonna have to tell kids to just be sitting out. And I think that also maybe wears the coaches down a little bit when they are having to schedule those 8 or 9 or 10 of those weekday nights, to the point where when you look at the fact that those teams then are often just not going to Saturday tournaments, even when you tell them about how great these Saturday tournaments are. It might just be completely a coach by coach thing, but I could see it being plausible where maybe they say, this is enough for my schedule, that this is the extent that I can handle these after school things, and maybe that means that we're only going to play 10, 15 games all year. Maybe we're just not going to get to any of those Saturdays. It's definitely not to say that that's like always wrong, or at least that's just what I've seen in Chicagoland in terms of teams that wind up getting more active versus those that don't.
Counterpoint. A circuit is not built from the top down. We focus on, especially when we're at an event like this, the top of the pile, the elite teams. A circuit, a statewide circuit as a whole, has to be built from the bottom up. In Ohio, there are roughly 900 high schools. There are maybe half of those who play something that could be considered Quiz Bowl on at least a once-a-year basis. Of those, half of them participate in NAQT or toss-up bonus of some sort. And at state this year, we had 50-some schools. So as the questions are pyramidal, so the circuit is pyramidal. And if we have those teams that only do their local league and don't venture out, of course we encourage them to do so, but at least they're playing. And in a league like the Mahoning League, where we have, as of last year, we had 27 schools, and almost everyone hosted a JV team as well. So when we're getting our questions from NQT, we can, when we submit the results, say, well, we have 54 participating teams. The top 15% of those earn bids to Atlanta. Do they all take them? No, not anywhere close. But it's something that those schools who finish in that position can go to their school boards and say, we qualified. For the top 30% of the eligible small schools, they qualify for Rosemont for small school nationals, and they can go to their school board and say, we qualified. And there's a bigger chance, you can look at the fields in the past of how many Ohio teams have come here for small school nationals, to say, we can do this, particularly in the Northwest. Ohio doesn't have a lot of great train service, nearly none, but the one Amtrak line that does go through does pass through Northwest Ohio. And a fair number of schools have taken the train to Union Station and then made their way here. So you do need those schools who are only going to do the local things to build up the schools that want to go further, because they may not qualify from a Saturday event, or they have to play the heavy hitters of your area or of your state. You have to give them that opportunity some other way.
Well, I would say so. So I think to me one of the advantages of a Saturday event is like we run so many of them. It gives you several chances to qualify. But even if you're not a school that qualifies, especially if you're running a good format, not single elimination, but if you're doing rebracketing, it allows those schools that are like, you know, so we do rebracketing. We've had some new schools, and then they end up in that bottom bracket, and they win all their games in that, and they get to play competitive games instead of, you know, just getting absolutely stomped and then, you know, then they're done. The Saturday thing's kind of event, and they really look forward to these afternoon matches where they get to play against teams of similar caliber, get to play these competitive games, these decisive games that come down to the last toss-up. Those are some of the most fun games I get to see, and I think that a lot of teams have told me they really enjoy that, especially these new teams and that their kids. It's a lot of fun for them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think at this point we are going to take a quick 5-minute break and regroup, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. So stay tuned. Thank you. Awesome. Welcome back to the second half of the 2026 David Riley Topics in Quiz Bowl Conference here at the beautiful Hyatt Regency O'Hare in Rosemont, Illinois. Our panel spent the last hour discussing a variety of topics when it comes to circuit building, circuit development. Our excellent panel relying on their diverse experiences to share what things look like in their circuit. But something that we were discussing at the very beginning has kind of been lingering with me, and that was when Colin McNamara was discussing some of the challenges he faces with the kind of particulars of the circuit in kind of the Pacific Northwest, Washington State and Idaho area in which he's primarily working. But I do think you were referencing it as a challenge, but I do think that it puts you in kind of a unique, interesting spot with your relationships with the teams in those circuit. Can you talk a little bit about what those have looked like in the past and what they look like today?
I mean, so in Idaho, at least, there's sort of two. So, um, with local teams, so the teams that are in Boise or Meridian, somewhere local to that, I can invite them. We can have in-person tournaments, and that's fun. That's great. But I also try to reach out to other teams, and that's a lot harder to do in-person tournaments. We did host one up in North Idaho once, and we had a couple U of I students staffing that. But I've not been able to replicate that. But one of the things I have is just I struggle just to be able to reach out to schools and you know because teachers are busy. It's really hard to get a teacher to take on an additional responsibility of like coaching a team. And so I try to contact principals, and I don't have the personal connections because I'm not in the schools. I don't see them at conferences or whatever. So I'm just blind emailing them, sending sending physical letters to principals, and it's not terribly effective. I it's hard to do that, and I think that maybe the best the best success I've had is to get a student hooked. But again, I can't get a student hooked if there's no team coming. And so it's just really hard for me to try to get teams to our tournaments the first time. I mean, 'cause like you said, once they're there, they have fun, but getting them there the first time is really hard for me, and I just have not had a lot of success with that. Because like I said, teachers are busy. They don't, it's hard to it's hard to ask somebody to take an additional responsibility, and I don't know how to necessarily pitch it to principals or assistant principals, or even who is the best person to pitch it to. The other thing, and just because we were talking about this early on, is that, and this is a situation I've had several times over the past like 15 years ago, is that sometimes there's a team that's been reliable and active and have contributed a couple teams, and then all of a sudden they just drop off the face of the circuit. In several cases, it's because the coach was a parent, and once their kid graduated, that coach was all of a sudden no longer interested. And then I have an even more unusual and more drastic case happening now, where one of our schools is now not eligible to play. And if the school's not eligible to play, the coach is a lot less willing to put in the work in Quiz Bowl. And so I mean, and so that it makes it even harder, to maintain a circuit if there's a small number of schools and there's a potential for even an active team to just disappear. So I don't know.
I've lost a fair number of teams over the years because the coach retired. One south of Canton, in the Worcester area. Smithville was a very successful team, came here, played small school nationals. I read their games 2 years in a row where they were 5-4 and they had to win to qualify the playoffs, and they lost both times. It hurt to read those games, but I did my duty. And their coach was their home ec teacher. She retired. Someone else took over who was a chip aficionado. Team went off the circuit. Other schools, we lost a very successful team because their school consolidated.
Is it easy, or have you been able to get them back on the circuit, or is it like once they're gone, it's just like recruiting a new team?
Smithville's gone. Newbury literally is gone because their school consolidated with another district, so that team will never exist again. I was just telling Ben in the break that there are schools in Ohio that unfortunately can't pass a levy or an income tax to save their skin. And I know one school in my Portage League had to leave because of a levy failure. They cut everything except varsity athletics. So all clubs, all non-varsity athletics, gone in a stroke of a pen. And we don't know if they'll come back. And it is hard once you lose a program to get it back. The online stuff that we did through the pandemic kept a lot of teams afloat and was a bridge to get them back to in-person. I think we would have lost a lot more without the capability to run online tournaments.
I think one of the issues you have also with recruiting people that want to to start a program is to make sure that you're actually getting someone that's going to be a coach and not just the club, captain or club leader, whatever. They're doing their duty as a teacher to be that, and all they do is show up. And then, because one of the issues that you have when you have that, then the kids are running the program, and then you run into, I think, something that's really important in making sure a circuit grows and keeps teams around is enforcing ethics and fair play and good sportsmanship. And when you have kids running the program, naturally, they're kids, and so they come up with ideas like, why don't we spread our best players across 4 teams, and then wouldn't that be fun? And then we all qualify. And what if we on a bounce back tournament, it used to be GATA's kind of has a rule on it now, but teams would out the team whose bonus it wasn't would say out loud a purposely wrong answer. So the team would be like, oh, that's the answer. And they say it, and then you bounce back what the real answer is. And that stuff, because again, the kids want to be clever and they want to show that, and that's the thing that you need a coach or someone who really understands how things are going to kind of really enforce that these are not the appropriate things to do. So it's really important to get someone who's actually a coach, who's actually going to be involved and take responsibility for the kids who are there, instead of just sitting off and letting the kids handle everything.
We had been hearing from Connolly in the first half about the work that the students on the Walter Payton team have done to kind of keep it alive and keep the recruiting process with your boot camp, as you described it a little earlier, Connolly. Andrew, what sort of stuff and I should have noticed at the beginning, but we are very blessed to have both Andrew and Greg on the panel because they are this year's recipients of the Benjamin Cooper Awards, which are awards given out by PACE every year to honor and recognize individuals who have made great contributions to high school quiz bowl. Greg won the what we call informally the Big Cooper for his work in Ohio, and Andrew won the we call it informally the Young Cooper Academic Ambassador Award, which is given specifically to individuals under the age of 25 who, despite their young age, have made incredible contributions to this game that we all love. So, Andrew, I'd love to hear a little bit in the same manner that Connolly was talking about some of the work that you've done in terms of getting those students interested, and kind of the way we were describing what Greg before the break too, that sort of building the circuit in a pyramidal sense, but you're starting at the bottom and working your way up, and the work that has gone into to kind of retain coaches and those kind of adults that need to be involved in order to keep the team alive and thriving.
Yes, for sure. So what's kind of funny with Belmont is that we've been a student-led team for a while. We definitely appreciate our faculty advisor a lot, but we've just been student-led. I think it's kind of a culture thing, even before my time. What I would credit for Belmont's success is sort of leadership's commitment to maintaining, freshmen and especially middle schoolers. One of the captains of Belmont Quiz Bowl many years ago decided to start the middle school program that turned into a massive success. When I was in middle school, it was a pretty small group, but it was a pretty dedicated group, and we found success at middle school nationals, obviously. And so we've been trying to keep that up. We've been trying to, make sure that our freshmen and our middle schoolers are supported just as much as our existing players. And so to that end, we've run, separate practices. For our middle school kids, we actually run a little mini tournament at the end of their session to kind of introduce them to the Quiz Bowl experience. Still within the span of about an hour, it's quick games, but we really want to introduce them to tournaments. And yeah, just generally supporting them, making sure that they have opportunities, they know how to study if they want to go further.
I was talking a little earlier about the pressures that are on high school students to impress universities. One of the things that universities say they want to see is they want to see high school students take leadership positions, leadership roles. In fact, every year we have a spat of like 4 or 5 students proposing we want to start a new club, the Hacky Sack Club or the whatever club they want to start. And so some of that goes by the wayside because that's only going to last as long as those students last. But giving your players in Quiz Bowl an opportunity for them to flex leadership muscles in that, like you're basically a student-led club. And yes, you need an advisor to be able to function for budget reasons and so forth. But you can spin that to a university, and they will like to see that. One of the things that we started was we have a Catholic school, Catholic middle school league in our area, and we started an end of season tournament for them that my own players are now. They're the tournament directors for, and they're the readers for, and the scorekeepers and so forth. And that gives them a little bit. It gives them a little bit extra on their application for a college, but it also gives them a little more investment in the activity too.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important to have students in leadership, just for the reasons that Ben was stating. Although I do also recognize it's important to strike a balance. We want adults to have the tournaments function. We need a faculty advisor to be there. I think, a lot of students can take responsibilities in Quiz Bowl, and unlike some of the, I would say, more iffy clubs, I think Quiz Bowl is a really important activity, and there's a lot of responsibility that goes into maintaining a Quiz Bowl club. It's kind of like running a small business, I would say. So yeah, I think just giving Quiz Bowl players roles, if they're interested in leading and doing any form of leadership, I would definitely support them. And I think it's also important to note that leadership can be completely separate from playing. So you don't have to be good at Quiz Bowl to be able to run a tournament, for example. So you could get a lot more people involved in Quiz Bowl in that way.
You get that kid who wants to be the student manager of the team.
We have several people. That's what's helping. Since I haven't been, like I was talking earlier, I can't find someone to be my assistant coach to handle my 40 players on my team. But I have some kids who just, either they don't have enough time to spend hours on QB Reader, carding, and stuff like that. That's not fun for them. But they like the social aspect of being on the team, and they have friends there. So they read at practice. They come to tournaments. They organize things. And so that's absolutely crucial, yes.
Speaking of socials, students being on social media, handling the team account, whether it's Instagram or whatever, and being able to reach out to other teams via those channels and recruit that way is amazing, because that is how that word of mouth is going to exponentially spread. As an administrator, we can talk to principals, we can talk to teachers, but that's not going to get us the volume of information out there about tournaments that students reaching out to other students will. There's many more possibilities for connection that way and passing it word about events through that word of mouth and those connections.
Yeah, I found changing how we communicated and where we communicated was very helpful for recruitment, especially recruiting young women. Um, when my when I entered my sophomore year of high school, I was one of 3 girls on the team. One of them graduated. We had maybe 15 guys. A lot of times it was me and dudes at practice, which isn't the most fun situation to be in. And so going into my junior year, when the founders of the club kind of left the team, that's when I really went like, oh, I can fix that. And so one of the things that we did was we actually completely changed I completely changed how I reached out to new players. I stopped doing any of the one-on-one messaging. I found that a lot of people, I would get them interested, and then when one-on-one one-on-one emails, anything like that started, they'd become stressed out. They felt really pressured, and when the team leadership was all men going into when I was a sophomore, it was a little bit like, okay, what's going on here? And then they would just not show up to practice. And so I switched it to all blast emailing, and I actually found that to be much better in getting female students to attend because it was more of like an open invitation. It wasn't so much we want you specifically, it was we want everybody, so bring your friends. And that's how we recruited a lot of our female players. But social media has done a lot for allowing us to connect like player to player. It's really easy to find people on Instagram. You have a name, even if it's just a first name, you can find someone. And from that, you can become more involved in their lives. You can learn a little bit more about other teams. I follow a lot of Illinois teams, even some Indiana teams on Instagram. Park Tudor posted a really funny meme today that got sent to my group chat because I thought that was really fun. And I had to explain who Park Tudor was to my group chat, but it's these new ways of connecting with Scholastic Bowl that were really helpful in recruitment. Instagram saying, we are doing a Scholastic Bowl boot camp, everybody show up, gets seen by 700 people as compared to a blast email sent out to 50. So using social media and using Instagram and using all of these new social apps to share our success, my friends weren't really aware of what Scholastic Bowl did until I started reposting our Instagram posts where it was like, we won nationals. We didn't win nationals, but like, we won state. And they were all like, Scholastic Bowl won state? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, I thought your team didn't exist 3 years ago. And I was like, we didn't. We did it anyway. So to be able to show people with pictures and sometimes fun videos, some cool collages, what we've been up to has been very helpful in expanding to other schools. Because now I have friends who are like, what's Scholastic Bowl? And I'm like, well, have I got news for you.
Yeah, I've been trying to let my team have more fun with that sort of thing. So one of the last things our faculty did was to each other we got a bunch of those little duck things, and they were like, everybody take a duck with you for summer vacation, and like put pictures in this drive of your duck having adventures. And I was like, yeah, I'm not really leaving South Bend very much. However, I have 5 Quiz Bowl players going to nationals who, if I hand each of them a duck, they are going to have great fun with that duck. And they have. So there is a literature duck, an arts duck, a sciences duck, a history duck, and then there's a pop culture duck. It's a little duck that's shaped like a Minecraft. It's like
I saw it on your Instagram.
Set. Yeah.
Pace reposted it. I've seen
Yeah,
the picture
Pace
of all
reposted
ducks
it.
on the bus.
Yeah, and I've noticed too, just the even just in the last 5 or so years, just the rise in the number of teams, like Ben, what you're describing with your ducks with the teams, and Walter Payton. I read for a couple of your teams earlier today, and you had your little stuffed bears. Just the number of teams with mascots that are trying to just and I will tell you too, in the staff chat, we notice these things and we're like, oh, if you catch like X, Y, and Z team, like get a picture of them with their mascot, those kinds of things, like just those like cute, fun little ways to just get engagement. Just the way I've seen that just blown up over the past 5 or so years has been really fascinating to see.
Yeah, one of my personal favorite Scholastic Bowl memories, we won a regionals plaque last year. It's a very nice, very large shaped plaque. I had some extra time, team was supposed to be cleaning up the rooms. I took what I'm going to call leadership obligations, and I did a little plaque photo shoot. Plaque in a backpack, plaque eating pizza, plaque taking a nap, plaque doing chemistry. And those got plastered all over the school. A, very fun way to tell people we won regionals, and B, a really fun way to get kids to be like, oh, I can join a team that has a regionals plaque eating pizza. That sounds fun. I like pizza, which is actually how I recruited a player. And they turned out pretty good, so.
Really, as Quiz Bowl can grow and continues to grow, some of the problems will actually iron themselves out because, yes, we have trouble trying to get a faculty member involved, but a faculty member who played Quiz Bowl back when they were in high school, they're more likely to get invested, and that is growing. That's on the rise. So that's gonna make Quiz Bowl more and more popular.
And you never know who's going to see one of those kinds of posts. One of the things I'm happy to have been doing over the past 10 or so years is anytime I can share anything, news article, social media post, anything about something that an Ohio team has done at a national tournament, I'm always throwing hashtag Team Ohio on it. I want the teams in Ohio to see themselves as one collective entity when we're coming here and representing our state to these other circuits who, admittedly, we come and we're not usually winning these things, but we want to come and give a good account of ourselves. And we want to show people that the activity in our state is strong. Even if we're not at the top end every year, we're at least putting in the work and making up the numbers. And, especially at the small school venue, we're comprising a good quarter of the field.
Yeah, it's great to hear what all of the people up here are doing with regard to social media. Belmont is pretty new to social media. I had the idea maybe like 3 years ago, and we've been posting occasionally. And so I think this has really helped, more people gain awareness of the club. And so yeah, the social component is really important. A lot of people my age are spending a lot of time on social media, so it's really important to reach out to them, where they are, in my opinion.
And by the way, follow me at QuizBoss.
But not on Blue Sky yet.
No, Instagram. You bring up a good point. We talked about the switch from Twitter to Blue Sky and other social media platforms, and I've had to really revamp my social game because I didn't use Instagram very much at all. But as teams have left Twitter and have gone more in the Instagram direction, I've had to learn things. And, Quiz Bowl is about learning things, right? So I shouldn't be scared of trying to pick up those, ways of communicating, especially if that's where the teams are. That's the point.
So is there any, are there any strategies that have been effective for you for reaching out to new schools? Like contacting principals or contacting teachers or just letting social media do its work on students? Or
I try to I try to push a lot of the outreach work to the schools that are in the area where I'm going to run an event. I know who's going to be there. Maybe we have three spots for new teams that we could bring in,
and let the coaches of those schools that you have reach out to other schools.
They know those people. Like I said, Ohio's a bit of a patchwork. North of I-70, a lot of the activity is run through what Ohio calls educational service centers. Different states call them different things, but they're multi-county conglomerates that handle usually things like speech therapists, school psychologists, special ed helpers, those kinds of things. South of I-70, and particularly down towards Cincinnati, you find that a lot of teams fall under their athletic umbrellas, that they're a part of the athletic department, especially in the Cincinnati area. So I leverage sometimes my contacts through working at the Ohio High School Athletic Association to try and at least get my foot in the door with one of those people and then go from there. It's just about trying as many things as you can and just see what sticks. And then once something sticks, divert more energy towards that. And it's different everywhere. You know, I realize that I stand on the shoulders of giants. There have been 3 other people who have won the Ben Cooper from Ohio, and 2 of them, Sue Carosa at Copley and the late Bob Weiser from Solon, were recognized for their outreach work in Ohio. I build off of what they've done. I build off of what other people have done, and I'm fortunate that I have that. I don't know that I could do, Colin, what you are currently doing in Idaho or anywhere
in
in
Utah,
the Pacific Northwest.
and I tried to do it in Utah too. I got BYU to run a tournament, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
So I couldn't follow it up with another tournament. But yeah. So.
All right. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you all so much for having us. I think that at this point we are open to taking some questions from the audience. I know that we've had a couple come in over our live stream situation and online. But at first, if there's anyone in our live audience, we do have Rama, who is one of our saintly AV tech people, walking around with a microphone. If there are questions, it looks like we've got somebody. If you could introduce yourself when you before you ask your questions, so we know who you are, sir.
I'm the parent coach of Conifer High School in Colorado. But thanks. But I'm originally from Orrville, Ohio, which Greg will probably know because it's 10 minutes from Smithville.
Yes.
Which got a shout out here. I played back in the day, which seems like the before pyramidal era of academic challenge. And then I played with at Case Western Reserve with Dr. Thomas Chuck in the fall of '96. And so, which I think also got a shout out this morning.
Yes.
And then I did nothing for 30 years. And so it has been a learning process. This is Conifer's first year. We made it here, which is
That's
kind of
fantastic.
phenomenal. Thank you. And it's been fascinating to listen to you guys, for sure. My question is really, I'd like to hear like a little bit more in the time you have now about like inside the team. So we got here because we have one star 8th grader playing up, and we have my own kids. They have, this is apparently genetic. They're very excited about it, which is how we started this team. But now, how do we get better? We have a lot of interest. Who should we be playing? How do we get I never studied back in my day. I think you guys all study now is what I have come to learn if you want to be good here. And so, it's a new era. If you want to comment on that, like what you specialize in, in my era, we just played the best toss-up players because that's all there was. And now it seems like there are some kids that are not necessarily in there to get toss-ups. They're in there for diversity. And so, how you manage those dynamics back when you're building your teams.
I think we have 2 students especially. Of course, coaches, feel free to jump in too, but 2 especially qualified students to speak to that, at the very least.
I think the sooner you can gamify QB Reader, the better. I know some schools use carding, but we don't really use carding to get better. We say you can, but we really turn everyone to QB Reader. I found that when kids can make it a competition between each other, they're going to have a lot more fun. And some kids, especially this year, have taken it upon themselves. They're going to play 1,000 chemistry toss-ups, and their friend's going to play 1,000 chemistry toss-ups on QB Reader. And then they're going to compare the stats. And for better or for worse, it has made them all very good at the categories they have done on QB Reader. Now, it won't work for every team. Payton has been very lucky to attract kids who are very, very, very invested, who are willing to sit down and spend hours on QB Reader. But even spending, when I was a freshman, I did it maybe 10 minutes a day, my commute home, a couple toss-ups, and I just had a lot of fun with it. And then all of a sudden you start to recognize stock clues and stuff that appears a lot. And that's how I kind of got to where I was. I didn't really do anything more complicated than that, and so the team has never really advertised anything more complicated than that. But as for like recruiting and attracting interest, the easiest thing I found personally was getting kids to care about the team and other members of the team was honestly what kind of set everything apart. It's really easy to get someone to play QB Reader because it's fun. It's a lot easier to get someone to play QB Reader because they want to play with a friend. And so to encourage friendships at what I would call almost our sister team at Northside College Prep, because they're the other Chicago public school that participates in Scholastic Bowl, we do kind of mentorship programs between students who are interested in playing in a certain category. They want to specialize in science. Well, we have a great science player who's really good. There's a group chat of our great science player, and then everybody interested in studying science. They talk about toss-up lines they're seeing a lot, clues they're seeing a lot. So just really forming the community to make it so that people, they not just care about studying for themselves, they care about studying for the team, was really great. And as for how we handle making teams, depends on the tournament. If someone's really good at science, and it's a very science and math heavy tournament, shout out IHSA, we definitely want more science representation on the team. Filling in other categories, we kind of start with like, can we cover science, science, literature, and history? And then from there, we do our best to work in social studies, fine arts, and everything else. But really, it's just dependent on who's available.
Yeah, I think you had a really good question, but first of all, I want to say it's really, really cool that you have an 8th grader who is leading the team.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
I remember coming to this tournament as an 8th grader, signed up as a standby team with the intention of soloing if a team dropped. Unfortunately, I did
remember
not
checking you in on those days, yeah.
Yes. And yeah, so I did not get that opportunity, but it's really great to hear that there are a few middle schoolers playing this tournament who have the quiz bowl bug. To your question about studying and improving, I think one really important thing is having mentors on the team, older players help out, and sort of give younger players their wisdom, and coaches can play this role too. In Belmont Quiz Bowl, one of our former captains, shout out to Creekor, suggested that we compile a doc with a bunch of different resources. So we have a doc and it's divided into subjects like literature, these resources, history, these resources, etc. And I think what's really important about studying is making sure that people have fun studying and they're studying things that they're genuinely interested in, because this will obviously make them want to study. QB Reader is really great for this. They get to play a lot of practice questions, and as mentioned earlier, like it's possible to have people compete on QB Reader, and this sort of drives people to improve. So yeah, shout out to Jeffrey Wu for making that very deserving Young Cooper Award winner from last year. So QB Reader is really great. There's just a lot of online tools and resources that people can use, and I believe there's many, compendiums of this knowledge to the websites, and just a lot of resources for people who want to improve at Quiz Bowl if you could find them.
Larry, you're nodding like you want to jump in here too.
Well, I was just going to talk. Sometimes you get that player who just can buzz in every single category, and that's great. Have fun with it. But I think what really helps when you get someone who's new, you're trying to convince someone, hey, do Quiz Bowl, and they're like, man, I don't know that much, and like, you don't have to. I tell them like, which of these things are you interested in? Literature? Okay. Well, that's much easier to tell someone like, look, study these books, study these clues about these books, instead of, oh, am I going to get good at literature? I have to get good at literature, science, history. I don't like all of this.
And of course, with QB Reader, you can set a subject. So
exactly.
So you can just
very,
get
very
questions from that
customizable.
Exactly. And so that's how it's easier. Like she was saying, like it's easier to get mentors. Like you have your lit mentor, and then like, oh, you're studying this book. Well, here's some good clues for this, and then it's much easier to build a team that way. And sometimes people want to do more than one category. That's fine. But I think as a starting point, that's how I try to build my team. I try to get people who are real. Like my literature player probably would be miserable if he had to play history questions only. He's not that good at it, but we have a good history player to build up on that. So that's kind of that also improves that teamwork and camaraderie instead of it's great if someone's really that good, but I don't know. I've always wondered if it's fun if you're one of the other 3 players on the team that person's getting 90% of the things. So I see my team. We have fun when they're relying on each other to get their category and stuff like that. So I think that's one way that we study. We study within categories and try to stick to that and become masters of specific things instead of all around people.
Yeah, 20 years ago when I was coaching and it was like you're trying to find the best toss-up players to sit there, I would always be hunting for who's the student in the school who likes to read. And because if you've read all these famous literature books, it's going to be easier for you to do that. And you almost just don't need to do that anymore. I've never read Ethan Frome, but doggone it, I know that there's a pickle dish that gets broken in the thing because it's a stock clue that shows up in Quiz Bowl. And so it's almost like those stock clues can be like it's a hack to becoming good at Quiz Bowl.
I think that one facet to still always keep in mind is still doing your best to have in-person practices, even if it's only going to be like 40 minutes after school to read one packet together, even if you're only going to have 5 or 6 people there practicing for a particular session. When we look at our team over at Walter Payton, we have a class period at the very end of the day, which is for extracurricular time. It's only 50 minutes, but we meet twice a week there. We also sometimes meet after school on Wednesday, and that might only be a few people. That's not going to be more than an hour. But I feel like this is something that kind of goes hand in hand with, on one hand, like you make sure to do what you can to like build together like a really supportive team environment where just in general, like you want everyone to be on good terms, friendly with each other. But when you have those in-person practices, I mean, if it's someone who's just like normally getting all the toss-ups or whatever, you have the time there to just like pause and just have a fun little conversation together. If there was some fun little stock clue about like the pickle dish, and if someone buzzed on that, you can just divert for 10 seconds and say, oh, like you can just talk about that stock clue and how interesting and funny that is. And I feel like on one hand, that doing that does help with even just like building those facts into your mind. Like you do remember information better when there's like an actual in-person experience tied to learning about a fact compared to if you're just seeing it on a screen on QB Reader. But on the other hand, I feel like one of the other general important things with just doing a lot of in-person practice, again, even if it's just a lot of little bits of it, is that you're also giving everyone on the team just this additional investment in their teammates. You're not just saying I need to go do QB Reader, I need to go do carding, I need to go study and learn these things because that's just my task. I think having the in-person practices gives you that angle of, hey, I enjoy spending time with these people. I enjoy answering questions with these people. This is something that I enjoy winning with these people. And I feel like that's one little facet that maybe just helps with the motivation on like the QB reading and the studying. So when you do go outside and you do those tasks, it has a context of I'm doing this because I like spending time with these people, and it's going to make all of that way more enjoyable. It's not just work.
Following on from that, at your tournaments, if your tournament director isn't giving away book prizes for individuals, I would highly recommend that. It does introduce that tangible aspect. I try and do at least, depending on the size of the field, 16 to 32 books. I go to Half Price Books or the library or whoever's having a book sale. Thankfully, there's a lot of places to do that in Central Ohio. My budget for book prizes is one team's entry fee, and that gets usually I can get everything I need from that, and it gives that tangible experience. It gives them useful information. I try, as long as I pick good, source material, and I try and vary it up. Literature and art and music and occasionally some pop culture. Gotta sprinkle that in there. But yeah, if your tournaments aren't doing that out there, recommend that. And if they are, good on them. Do you know the other teams in the Colorado area that come to events like this, like Weld Central or Grand Junction, or
Where is Conifer? Okay.
Yep.
Which is also in Washington. Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were in a bit of a Quiz Bowl desert. That described Indiana for quite some time. Um, but the fact that your mention of the University of Colorado makes me think I was going to say something earlier. If you have a college that has a team in your area, see if you can connect to them at all. We have two, I mean, we're right next to Notre Dame, basically. Notre Dame has a decently active team, and we have connected with them well enough that we host a tournament with them coming in being the moderators. And they are not going to, they're going to show the kids what Quiz Bowl is all about. They're not going to like slow down their reading or anything like that. And I wouldn't, by the way, wouldn't do that in practice. You need to show them what Quiz Bowl, they have to be able to ready to play at the speed of Quiz Bowl. Quiz Bowl teaches you to think fast, true. And then we also host one of the regionals for our state, and I'm the only one running it who gets Notre Dame to come in and be the readers for that too. And that tournament runs without a hitch because you are dealing with people who know what they're doing. They've played Quiz Bowl before, and they are also the embodiment of what these kids can become. The same way my kids are now being readers for the middle school tournament. They're getting the Notre Dame above them, and they're seeing, oh, this is a progression.
Awesome. Yeah, those were some wonderful. Oh, did you want to?
Yeah, also on the subject of the book prizes, there's so I co-run a tournament with Hinsdale Central in the fall. It's kind of a successor to the University of Illinois Early Bird Tournament that used to exist for a long time before the pandemic. When I've hosted it both years, one thing that I have done is finding email addresses of basically every single coach everywhere in Chicagoland and beyond. Just send them all a blast email invite. Both years I've gotten some bites, like maybe one or two per year, of a coach who had never gone to Saturday tournaments before and they wanted to try it out. But more importantly, for the book prizes, one thing that I did last year, so fall of 2024, was not just giving book prizes to just the top however many individuals. But what I also did was I also gave a book prize to the top single individual scorer on every team in the field.
Yep.
Who was not just in like the top 10. Yep. And so like even if there was a team that finished dead last, whoever their top scorer was got one of the books, got to pick a book, got to have that rewarding experience as part of their day. And that's obviously going to cost more for those extra books, but I feel like that's a really nice touch, especially if the goal is, hey, we were lucky enough to get a bite from this team. We were lucky enough to get them to our tournament. How do we encourage them to keep going? I think that was an idea that I liked.
Now, are we giving neg prizes?
Only a trash.
All right. All right. I think we might have time for just one more question. At this point, I want to. Everyone here has had a very long day of coaching, playing, staffing. I want to make sure I'm respectful of everybody's time as well.
Well, if no one in the audience has a question, we have a couple from the Discord that we'll share as soon as I find them. All right, Eric Mukherjee from USNA asks, wait, you guys are getting paid to coach Quiz Bowl? Let's see here, hold on 1 second. More seriously, Spencer Gaja, who's a graduating senior, asks, since many of you have experience in running tournaments in your cities or states, what tips do you guys have in opening schools to Quiz Bowl and building their programs, especially in the middle school scene?
That's a big topic, but we've got the buzzers out. Does anybody want to have a buzzer race to answer first?
Yeah. Okay. I didn't really catch the end of that question. Was it about running tournaments or was it about?
Yeah, specifically, it's about what tips do you guys have in opening schools to Quiz Bowl and building their programs, especially in the middle school scene?
Okay, yeah. So Belmont, we're trying to foster the Massachusetts middle school circuit because, we had such a great experience and we want to make sure other teams have that same experience. So one thing we do is at one of our 4 high school tournaments, we also host a middle school division. So this allows the middle school teams to, play some Quiz Bowl. I think just like lower entry fees for middle school teams, maybe slightly shorter tournaments, and yeah, just basically making sure that you're putting the same amount of effort as you're putting in for a high school tournament, for a middle school tournament. One thing I do in the middle school circuit is I run a lot of, I run a good amount of online tournaments for middle school teams, and yeah, I just make sure like these are still high quality tournaments. I like to plan all of the tournaments like way ahead of time. My biggest tip for running a tournament would be plan as much as you can before the day of the event. And yeah, as I said earlier, like the middle school circuit is really important. I think a lot of people in Quiz will kind of discount the middle school circuit, but I think sort of going back to the idea of like building from the bottom, that it's really good to start Quiz bowlers young and develop a really healthy middle school circuit.
And one other thing, I mean, any high school that has a Quiz Bowl team, contact their feeder middle school, and that will, there might be like younger siblings there, and also is a good way for that high school to, have experienced players when they reach high school. So you might want to, focus on trying to look at those feeder middle schools for any high school teams.
Yeah. I know I've technically been serving as the moderator and not a panelist in and of myself, but one thing, my Quiz Bowl home is Minnesota. I live in Minneapolis and I'm very active in the Twin Cities circuit. One thing, we have a handful of people who are really, really in charge of the Twin Cities circuit is so robust because of a couple of individuals who have really poured so much time and effort and energy. And one thing that happens is we do have a middle school scene in there, and we have kind of the middle school circuit. For us, it's kind of getting we have a good middle school circuit, we have a good high school circuit. It's getting people who played in middle school to continue on playing in high school. And so something that's been happening over the last couple of years is when we have a middle school tournament, a representative of the Minnesota High School Quiz Bowl League, so our version of league that's, 4 rounds on Thursday nights, once a month, and then playoffs, and then the championship. Someone comes and speaks, talk to your coaches. They will get you in touch with the equivalent team at your feeder high school if you want to keep doing this. Just making them aware that maybe you tried it out in middle school. And of course, this is assuming that you've built off of what Andrew was describing and gotten that kind of middle school circuit set up. getting those feeder situations, getting them to recognize, oh, this is something I, maybe tried for fun for a year or two. I really like it, but I'm not totally sure. But no, there is a path for you to continue to do this for essentially as long as you want, making sure that you're visible and present as those students who are transitioning out of the middle school circuit into potentially the high school circuit. Um, just making yourself present and visible and available, in addition to everything Andrew said about the actual work of building the middle school circuit in and of itself, trying to make it as smooth of a transition as possible for, on, for lack of a better term, the user end, to get those students really kind of neatly integrated as soon as possible if that's something they want.
As someone who doesn't, or Chicago and Illinois has a middle school quiz bowl, but it's not as large as high school quiz bowl is, and Payton does not have a feeder school at all. We pull from many schools and around the city. Looking for quiz bowl adjacent things that we can recruit from has been very helpful. If someone has done History B or History Bowl or whatever that looks like in your state, they'd probably make a pretty decent history player. They might be interested in doing history for quiz bowl. Chicago Public Schools does something called Battle of the Books. You basically memorize all the facts you would memorize as a literature player and play something really similar to Scholastic Bowl in middle school, even if it's only literature focused. That person might be interested in being a literature player in Scholastic Bowl. And really, any academic competition that they might have in middle school. I know at Payton, we recruit from the math team. One of our biggest difficulties is scheduling Scholastic Bowl around math team stuff. And also our Kurtaman team, so people who are studying Latin, just trying to find ways where people who don't know about Scholastic Bowl, where might they go instead? They're going to go to anything else academic that they can find. So if you're trying to recruit for a middle school scene, it might be helpful to start in some Scholastic Bowl adjacent activities.
Picking back off of that, if you're in a smaller district that doesn't potentially offer Latin or anything like that, there are 4 things you could do in a classroom. You can read, you can write, you can speak, and you can listen. We tend to focus a lot on the first 2 and not so much on the last 2. Quiz Bowl is a game about learning, but it's also a game about listening. And if you want to go for kids who may be interested in Quiz Bowl, find the people who are already doing critical listening. Those are your folks in your music program. Those are your folks in your forensics program if you have speech and debate. People who are already used to using their ears critically. This time you're just tuning them to a slightly different frequency.
Yeah, one thing about Quiz Bowl that I find really interesting is that it is all subject, and a lot of the activities that she mentioned earlier, like Kurtaman or History Bowl, these are single subject things. I think it's really important to emphasize to players that you are on a team and you do not need to cover every category. So I think what Larry was talking about earlier about having players specialized is really important, making sure that they don't feel overwhelmed and that they're able to find their niche in the Quiz Bowl Club is super important.
All right. Well, I am so appreciative of our incredible panel and the discussion we just had over the course of the last couple of hours. This video has been live streamed. It will be available to watch on the PACE YouTube channel at any time. And thank you so much for joining us, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.